Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. They came for my beach with fake smiles and forged papers. First, it was letters. Then, strangers on my sand. By the time they broke into my home and claimed it as theirs, it was war. I didn't start it, but I sure as hell was going to finish it. I had lived on the edge of Seacrest Bay for almost 5 years, long enough to know the rhythm of the tides and the sound of every gull that circled over my little strip of heaven. My cottage stood at the edge of a sloping dune framed by sea oats and weathered fencing, the kind of place people drove past and said, "I wish that was mine." It was. I designed it myself, an architect's reward to himself after decades of building for others. The house sat on 30 feet of private beachfront, protected by a wooden gate, native vegetation, and the kind of solid legal documentation that could make even the county assessor sweat. It wasn't big, but it was mine. Every board, every inch of sand. That morning, I found the note wedged under the latch of my gate, flapping lazily in the sea breeze. It was printed on thick paper with an embossed logo that read, Seacrest Bay Villas Homeowners Association. The message was short, almost polite. Please provide access to HOA members for shoreline use between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. The beach cannot be private. It belongs to everyone. Signed, Karen Lawrence, President, Seacrest Bay, HOA. At first I laughed. It felt like one of those absurd neighborhood chain letters, the kind that ends with, failure to comply will bring bad luck and sand fleas. But when I looked up and saw a cluster of new houses beyond the dunes, all perfect pastel clones with identical decks and solar lights, I realized it wasn't a joke. Seacrest Bay had expanded again, swallowing what used to be vacant county land. And, apparently, they had decided that my beach came with the deal. The next morning, I went out with my coffee, ready to ignore the whole thing. But when I reached the edge of my fence, I froze. 4 people, 2 men, 2 women, were spread out on my beach, towels and umbrellas planted like little flags of conquest. One of them was setting up a speaker, blasting some cheery pop tune that did not belong anywhere near my quiet corner of the coast. I pushed open the gate and walked toward them, calm but incredulous. "Morning," I said. "Can I help you folks?" A woman in a wide-brimmed hat glanced up at me with the weary patience of someone dealing with a slow waiter. "Oh, hi," she said. "We're with the Seacrest Bay HOA. Karen said this was the new shared beach access. Gorgeous spot you've got here." I blinked. "I do. Because it's mine." She laughed lightly as if I'd made a clever joke. "Oh, we understand, but technically the shoreline isn't private. HOA approved access last week." "Approved access," I repeated. "To my property?" Before I could say more, another voice cut in. Sharp, polished, and unmistakably self-important. "That's correct." Karen Lawrence herself was standing at the edge of the dune, arms crossed, sunglasses reflecting the sea. She looked like she'd stepped out of a real estate brochure, neat, tan, confident, and entirely out of her jurisdiction. "Mr. Edwards, I assume," she said, striding closer. "I'm Karen Lawrence, president of Seacrest Bay Villas HOA. I left you a note yesterday." "I got it," I said, "and I thought it was a misunderstanding." "It's not," she replied smoothly. "All properties within the bay's coastal line are subject to community beach access. You can't fence off nature. The beach must remain open for the residents' enjoyment." I gestured at the sign clearly posted beside my gate. "Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted." "This property isn't part of your development, Mrs. Lawrence. It's an independent parcel predating Seacrest Bay by at least 20 years. Her lips pursed. "Be that as it may, the HOA board has voted to extend communal access along the entire shoreline. We're all part of the same community, Mr. Edwards. You can't just claim the ocean for yourself." "I'm not claiming the ocean," I said evenly. "I'm claiming the 30 feet of sand that I bought, pay taxes for, and maintain. You and your board have no authority here." Karen's smile didn't reach her eyes. "You might want to review the bylaws again. Refusing access could be considered a violation of public easement." "Then feel free to have your lawyer explain that to my property deed," I said, turning away. "Until then, get your people off my beach." For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she tilted her head slightly, that artificial calm slipping just enough to show the irritation beneath. "This isn't over," she said finally. "You'll be hearing from us." By the time I got back to the porch, the group was packing up, muttering among themselves. Karen stood at the gate a moment longer, staring at the private property sign as if she could erase it by sheer force of HOA authority. When she finally left, the gate clicked shut behind her, and I thought, foolishly, that the matter was finished. I couldn't have been more wrong. 3 days later, a thick white envelope arrived in my mailbox. Heavy paper, gold HOA seal stamped on the back like it had been blessed by some bureaucratic pope. I stood on my porch, the ocean wind tugging at my shirt as I peeled it open, already feeling the tension coil in my chest. The letter inside was printed on official Seacrest Bay Villas letterhead, and it wasted no time getting to the point. Dear Mr. Edwards, pursuant to the Seacrest Bay HOA Board Resolution 2407, passed unanimously on June 12th, all residents with property adjacent to community shoreline are required to 1. Provide unrestricted public access to the beach area between the hours of 9 a.m. and 8 p.m. during summer season, June through August. 2. Remove any gates, fences, natural barriers, or private structures, including but not limited to piers, decks, and retaining walls that obstruct community use of the shoreline. 3. Provide a duplicate access key to any buildings on said property for emergency use by HOA certified personnel. Non-compliance may result in escalating fines, legal action, and lien placement per HOA enforcement guidelines. It was signed in bold black ink, Karen Lawrence, President, and below that, Marvin Cottle, HOA Legal Counsel. I sat down hard on the porch step and read it again, then a third time, this time out loud like maybe hearing it would make it make more sense. Remove my pier, provide a key to my house? These lunatics had gone from passive-aggressive beach squatters to full-blown colonial overlords in under 72 hours. I didn't even finish my coffee. Instead, I grabbed my file box from under the desk, the one with every permit, inspection, and survey I'd ever filed for this place. Then I called SH Legal, Susan Hampton, my real estate attorney, a woman who had once single-handedly shut down an illegal resort expansion by making the county planner cry on Zoom. I sent her the letter, and within minutes, my phone buzzed. Her voice came through like steel wrapped in honey. "Garrett, this is hot garbage." "Good," I said. "I thought maybe I was having a stroke." "You're not. They don't have jurisdiction over your land. I pulled your parcel map when you first called me years ago, remember? You're a separate plat entirely, excluded from the Seacrest development. They don't even border you directly. There's a 5-foot strip of county-owned conservation land between your lot and the HOA boundary. It's a buffer zone." "Like an actual moat," I muttered. She laughed dryly. "Exactly. And the pier? Built legally, with Coastal Commission approval and zoning clearance in 2018. As for the key demand, that's not just illegal, that's batshit. So what do? You ignore it. For now, don't engage directly. Let them escalate and bury themselves in their own idiocy. In the meantime, start a paper trail. Date everything. Photograph every interaction. And if they set foot on your property again, you call me. Or the sheriff. I spent the rest of the day installing 3 new motion-activated cameras, one on the gate, one pointed at the beach, and one over the pier. I also put up a laminated sign on the inside of the gate that read, "Private property, not part of Seacrest Bay HOA. Trespassers will be recorded and prosecuted." The next morning, a teenager on a beach cruiser rode by and snapped a photo of it. That evening, someone left a note on my windshield at the grocery store. "Selfish hermits don't belong in our community." I didn't recognize the handwriting, but I could smell the HOA all over it. The cameras picked up Karen 2 days later. She didn't step onto the property, but she stood outside the gate, talking to someone on the phone, gesturing furiously toward the fence like she was arguing with a ghost. At one point, she even pointed at my pier, shaking her head like it had personally insulted her. That night, I got another letter, this one unsigned, just printed in all caps Times New Roman. "The beach isn't yours. We will take it back." The next morning, I found dog feces smeared across the bottom half of my gate. I had a feeling this wasn't about a beach anymore. I was gone for less than 48 hours. Just a quick trip inland to meet a client and grab some supplies. When you live out by the water, every errand turns into a full-day production. Stock up or starve. I came back with a trunk full of groceries, 2 cases of mineral water, and a new toilet fill valve. What I didn't expect was to find the gate to my property wide open, the latch cut clean with bolt cutters. At first, I thought maybe someone had broken in and left, until I saw the sign. Nailed to the driftwood post next to my walkway was a crisp white placard, printed in bold blue block letters, Imminent Reclamation, Seacrest Bay, HOA. Temporary occupancy suspended pending ownership clarification. I stood there in the driveway, hands still on the steering wheel, just staring at it. My jaw clenched so hard my molars ached. Then I saw the SUV in front of the house. Black, spotless, and sporting a magnetic HOA Services logo on the side like it was some kind of government vehicle. There were people in my house. I parked fast, left the groceries, and headed for the porch. The front door was closed, but the blinds inside were moving. Someone peeking. I knocked hard. No answer. I knocked again, this time loud enough to make the porch boards creak under my weight. Finally, the door opened a crack. A man in a pale polo shirt and khakis stared out at me like I was the one who didn't belong. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice dry as cardboard. "Yeah," I said. "I live here." "Who the hell are you?" He didn't flinch. "We're representatives of Seacrest Bay HOA Facilities Division. We've been instructed to temporarily occupy the property until the status of shoreline ownership is resolved." I laughed. Not the amused kind. The what the hell is happening kind. "You're occupying my house?" He nodded, like that wasn't the most psychotic sentence ever spoken. "It's a temporary community requisition for inspection and transitional compliance monitoring." I could feel the blood in my ears. "This isn't an embassy. This is my home." "You're trespassing." He shrugged. "We have documentation filed with the municipal zoning office. You can contact them if you like." That's when I saw another guy lounging in my reading chair. He had his shoes off, socks up on my reclaimed wood coffee table, drinking a damn La Croix from my fridge. I turned, pulled out my phone, and dialed 911. While I was on hold, I walked back to the gate, snapped photos of everything. The sign, the cut latch, the vehicle plates, the people inside. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from fury. I didn't even notice the woman walking down the street until she called out to me. "Afternoon, Mr. Edwards. Karen." In a salmon cardigan, manicured and smug, holding a clipboard like the queen of paperwork. "Came to admire your handiwork," I asked. "Or supervise the burglary in progress." She approached slowly, carefully staying on the public easement. "This isn't a burglary, it's enforcement. The board approved a temporary occupation under provisional oversight." "Under whose authority?" "The HOA's, naturally. And the interim zoning liaison." "Who?" She smiled, eyes glinting like a crocodile in a boutique. "Robert McKinley. He's assisting us in verifying boundaries. Perhaps you've heard of him. Former county zoning supervisor." I had. And I also knew he was canned for tampering with survey records back in 2019. Of course, she had him in her pocket. The police finally arrived. A cruiser pulled in, lights flashing. 2 officers, one younger, chewing gum like he was bored already, and an older guy who looked like he'd rather be at a fishing pier than here. I explained everything, calmly, with photos. Karen handed them a folder full of documents, watermarked, notarized-looking pages stamped with something resembling a county seal. The older officer flipped through them, brows pinched. "These look legit." "They're not," I said. "I have my deed inside. Permits, boundary maps, everything. My lawyers already confirmed they don't have jurisdiction." Karen leaned in sweetly. "There's a pending inquiry. Until it's resolved, we're simply maintaining stewardship over disputed land." The officer exhaled. "Sir, without an injunction or judge's order, we can't physically remove them if there's paperwork. It's a civil matter. They're in my house." He nodded slowly. "I understand. But until we verify the authenticity of these forms through the zoning office, our hands are tied." I watched the sun drop behind the dunes as they left. The intruders still inside, the HOA SUV still parked on my lawn. I stood there until the lights disappeared down the road, the air turning colder by the minute. Then I went inside the workshop, pulled out the drone I usually used for structural photography, and launched it from my back deck. It circled above, silently recording everything. Every move inside the house, every car, every face. If they wanted a war, they just got one. I didn't sleep that night, not a wink. The drone footage looped on my laptop while I sat at the kitchen table, jotting notes, cross-referencing property lines, and rereading every official document I'd ever received since buying this place. The bastards were still in my house. I could see one of them walking around in my slippers, my damn slippers. By 7 a.m., I was on the phone with Susan. She picked up on the second ring, already sounding like she'd skipped coffee and gone straight to litigation mode. They cut your gate lock and moved in, she repeated, voice flat with disbelief. That's not just trespass. That's constructive possession with criminal elements. Did the officers take your report? They did, I said, but they also didn't kick them out. The documents Karen gave them looked official. Susan made a noise halfway between a sigh and a snarl. Send me everything. Scans, photos, footage, especially the paperwork. I uploaded everything into a shared drive and texted her the link. By noon, she'd reviewed it all and sent me back an email with one word in the subject line: forgeries. I called her immediately. First, she said, that temporary order is printed on a zoning letterhead that hasn't been used since 2015. The seal is a scan, not embossed. The signature at the bottom belongs to a guy who retired 6 years ago. And the rest. The property diagrams have been edited. They altered parcel lines to make it look like your beach overlaps the Seacrest Bay HOA footprint. But here's the kicker. The digital metadata on the PDFs shows they were created by Robert McKinley on his personal laptop. The ex-county official, I said. Karen's guy. Yup, Susan confirmed. Who now styles himself a freelance consultant for shoreline development. You can't make this up. She had already submitted an emergency verification request to the county clerk's office, demanding authentication of the documents. She also flagged the forged parcel map to the recorder's office and sent copies to the zoning department, the sheriff's legal liaison, and, for good measure, the local ABC affiliate's investigative unit. Karen had gone nuclear, and now we were launching countermeasures. That afternoon, I drove to the zoning office myself. The building was a bland two-story with flickering fluorescent lights and the scent of permanent bureaucratic despair. At the front counter, I handed over the forged documents and asked for verification. The clerk's face tightened after glancing at the first page. "Sir, where did you get this?" she asked. "It was handed to me by people currently occupying my home." She didn't answer, just stood up and disappeared through a door. 10 minutes later, she returned with a supervisor who looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. "These forms weren't issued by our office," he said carefully. "We stopped using this template in 2014. The field codes are wrong. This seal doesn't match our embossing. This isn't ours." They gave me a written statement to that effect, and I took a photo of it on the front desk. Evidence. One brick at a time. That evening, Susan filed 3 legal actions on my behalf. A cease and desist demand to the Seacrest Bay HOA and its acting board, a criminal complaint for document forgery against Robert McKinley, and a petition for immediate injunctive relief to remove unauthorized occupants from private residential property. We knew it wouldn't be resolved overnight. The courts weren't built for speed. But we also knew one thing. Karen had stepped way over the line. While we waited, I kept my drone in the air and my cameras online. I recorded everything, the trash they left by my fire pit, the moment one of them unhooked my kayak trailer and used it to haul boxes from the SUV, and even a phone conversation one of them had on the porch, loudly discussing whether the HOA would reimburse meal expenses, like they were on a corporate retreat. I also caught Karen herself visiting the house again, this time wearing oversized sunglasses and holding a binder under her arm. She knocked, walked right in, stayed about 20 minutes, then came out smiling like she'd just closed a deal. She didn't see the drone above her. I edited the footage together into a short highlight reel, time-stamped, watermarked, and backed up on 3 drives and 2 clouds. Then I emailed it to Susan. Her response, "This is gold. They're done." But I wasn't satisfied. Not yet. So I went one step further. I called in an old friend of mine, Marco, a licensed geodetic engineer I used to work with on coastal restoration projects. He showed up the next day with his gear, survey tripod, precision GPS receiver, rangefinder, and that unmistakable look on his face that said, "Let's dismantle some bullshit." We spent 4 hours mapping the property line from every legal marker, stone and pin. His conclusion was as beautiful as it was damning. Not only was my parcel untouched by Seacrest Bay's development, but the HOA's own map encroached 5 feet onto county conservation land, meaning they were technically trespassing just by existing in that buffer zone. Karen had forged documents to steal beach access and ended up implicating her whole HOA in an illegal land overreach. All I had to do now was wait. I knew something had shifted the moment I saw the unmarked sedan roll past my gate, slow to a crawl and stop. Not a police cruiser, something darker, quieter, government tint, government wheels. Then came the second car. and the third. Within minutes, a full convoy was parked in front of my house. Sheriff's deputies, plainclothes investigators, and a zoning officer I recognized from the county's website, the kind with a badge and clipboard combo that meant business. I stood barefoot on the porch, arms crossed, coffee in hand, and waited. This was the moment I'd been preparing for, the moment the dam would break. They didn't even bother knocking. The first pair of deputies walked straight to the front door, followed by a uniformed zoning agent holding a warrant in a clear plastic folder. I could see the embossed seal from 20 feet away. "Mr. Edwards?" the lead officer asked. I nodded. "We're executing a county order to inspect, secure, and recover this property from unauthorized occupation. You filed the complaint?" "Yes, sir," I said. "They're inside. One on the couch, another probably raiding my fridge." He gave a curt nod, then turned to his partner. "Let's go fishing." I watched them disappear inside, followed by the zoning officer and two plainclothes detectives. The moment was almost surreal. The calm before the storm, the last exhale before the thunder hits. Then came the shouting. It was muffled at first. Someone arguing, furniture scraping, doors opening and closing. Then suddenly clear as a bell. "I'm an HOA representative. You have no right." The man in the pale polo shirt from before burst out onto the porch, red-faced, clutching a leather binder like it was a legal shield. "You can't do this," he yelled at the officer behind him. "We were authorized." Karen filed the occupancy order herself. The deputy was unfazed. "That order was deemed fraudulent. The county has confirmed the documents were forged, and you're trespassing on private residential property." "You don't understand," the man insisted. "We were following instructions." "This is a governance issue, not criminal," the officer replied with the sound of handcuffs clicking shut. Inside, the other man, the LaCroix thief, was led out in silence, head down, hands behind his back. They sat him on the porch rail while detectives photographed the living room like a crime scene. Then I saw her, Karen Lawrence, marching down the street like she owned the tide, HOA clipboard in hand and a Bluetooth earpiece jammed in her ear. She must have caught wind that something was happening and came to assert whatever twisted authority she still thought she had. The moment she saw the deputies, her stride faltered, only slightly, but enough to show the first crack in the mask. "What is going on here?" she demanded, stepping up to the porch. "This is Seacrest HOA jurisdiction, and you're interfering with board operations." The zoning officer turned. "Ma'am, you need to stay outside the perimeter. This is an active investigation." "I am the HOA president," she barked. "You're trespassing on administrative grounds." "No," I said calmly, stepping forward. "You are, and you've been doing it for weeks." She turned to me, eyes gleaming. "Don't start with me, Mr. Edwards. You've been combative since the beginning. Your property falls under shared easement by ordinance." "No, it doesn't," said a voice behind her. Susan had arrived. Dressed in heels and a linen blazer that said, "I don't lose," she stepped into view like she'd been waiting her whole career for this moment. She carried a black leather folio under one arm and a manila envelope in the other. "I represent Mr. Edwards," she said clearly, handing the folder to the lead detective. "Here are certified copies of the deed, the parcel map, zoning verification, and a county statement confirming the documents used by the HOA were falsified by Robert McKinley, currently under investigation for forgery and unauthorized access to municipal templates." Karen blinked. "That's absurd." Susan didn't flinch. "There's a paper trail, video evidence, metadata analysis, and a sworn affidavit from your own former zoning officer admitting he fabricated the maps under your instruction." Karen's face twisted into something reptilian. "This is political." "No," the detective cut in. "This is criminal." Karen's voice sharpened like broken glass. "I'm calling my attorney. You'll regret." And then, in what can only be described as a cinematic gift from the universe, she saw the drone. It was hovering just overhead, silent and steady, its camera pointed squarely at her. I had launched it the moment she stepped onto my driveway, and it had recorded every word. Karen's face went pale. "You don't have the right to film me." "You stepped onto private property," I said, "while committing a felony. Say hi to the court." She lunged. In one movement, she grabbed a rock from the flower bed and hurled it at the drone. It missed wildly. Then she reached for my phone, trying, I think, to snatch it away, but instead collided with the zoning officer's tablet, sending it clattering to the pavement. The deputy didn't even hesitate. He grabbed her arm and spun her around, pressing her against the railing. She screamed, loud and shrill and enraged, like a toddler denied a toy. "You're assaulting an HOA president," she screeched. "You assaulted a county officer," the deputy corrected. "You're under arrest." They cuffed her right there on my porch. As she was led down the steps, kicking and sputtering, Susan leaned close and whispered something I couldn't hear. But whatever it was, it made Karen's entire body go rigid. The other officers finished clearing out the representatives, cataloging every piece of evidence: the clipboard, the printed maps, even the half-eaten snack bar one of them had left on my side table. By dusk, the cars were gone. The house was mine again, and the only sound left was the wind and the distant crash of waves. It wasn't over yet, but the fortress had cracked, and the queen was in chains. The morning after Karen's arrest, my property was quieter than it had been in weeks. No knocks, no voices beyond the fence, no shuffling of beach chairs or unsolicited HOA memos stuck under the gate. Just the sea, the wind, and the faint buzz of my fridge finally free of freeloading energy vampires. But the silence didn't bring peace. It brought paperwork. By 10 a.m., I was back at the county office, this time not as a desperate homeowner, but as an official complainant in an ongoing investigation. Susan had already filed a motion to freeze HOA activities pertaining to my property until the legal proceedings concluded. Meanwhile, the county was conducting an internal review of how fraudulent documents had made it into circulation under official seals. What we learned that day cracked the case wide open. The man named in the falsified order, Robert McKinley, wasn't just any disgraced former county employee. He had been fired 2 years prior for modifying building permits in exchange for community donations. Karen, it turned out, had been one of his donors. When we traced the fake parcel adjustments and the bogus HOA utility easement that claimed to extend through my property, all roads led back to him. Even worse, several of those documents were signed using a fake registrar's signature. I had it blown up on a screen. The ink on the page shimmered under forensic light, and the date on the notary stamp was from a holiday, when the county offices were closed. Amateur hour. While I was still absorbing that, Susan handed me a set of images that chilled me more than anything had yet. They had come from the body cams worn by the deputies during Karen's outburst. Apparently, after her arrest, she'd told the officers that I was squatting on unregulated coastal land and that the house had been marked for future communal development. That's why she'd sent her lackeys in, not just to reclaim what she believed was communal land, but to occupy it long enough to claim abandonment. She was trying to use a reverse adverse possession clause, Susan said, shaking her head. Problem is, it doesn't work if the real owner's alive, present, and yelling at you to leave. Back at the house, I started rebuilding. Literally. They'd broken one of the main gate hinges, and the front fence had gouges from what looked like a crowbar. The lock had been replaced, by me, this time, with a commercial-grade keypad. I didn't want keys anymore. Not after someone waltzed in here like they owned the place. I also added a second line of cameras and motion-triggered lights. Not just as a deterrent, but as a message. I wasn't going anywhere. Despite Karen being in jail, HOA members kept up their passive-aggressive barrage. I received an anonymous envelope with a printout from the Seacrest Bay HOA Handbook. The section highlighted, rules regarding beach access for community benefit. Neatly underlined in pink highlighter, no note, no return address, just one page, one rule. 2 days later, the local news picked up the story. Somehow, a journalist had gotten wind of the arrest, the forged orders, and the police raid. The article was titled, "Private Beach War, HOA President Arrested for Forgery, Fraud." The thumbnail. Karen mid-scream, mid-handcuff, hair wild in the ocean breeze like a deranged mermaid of bureaucracy. The piece was fair, surprisingly so. They mentioned my property rights, the forged documents, and even included a statement from the county sheriff. This is a serious matter of abuse of power and document tampering. By the time the piece aired on local television, neighbors I'd never met were stopping me on the beach to shake my hand. One guy offered to build me a custom HOA free zone sign out of driftwood. I said I'd think about it. Then came the summons. Karen wasn't just being prosecuted. She was suing me for defamation, unlawful surveillance, and emotional damages. Apparently, the drone footage and body cam videos made her the subject of social ridicule and mental anguish. She was represented by some silver-haired lawyer with a name like Denton or Draper, clearly flown in from out of town. Their opening salvo, a cease and desist demanding I take down all my surveillance footage from the web and refrain from public commentary regarding Ms. Lawrence's professional reputation. Susan laughed so hard she snorted coffee. "You want to know the legal term for this?" she asked. "It's called flailing." Still, we had to respond. And we did, with a 47-page counterclaim, fraud, trespassing, property damage, illegal occupation, abuse of a public notary system, and yes, assault of a county officer. In short, we threw the book at her. The next time I saw Karen was through a courtroom live stream. Her bail had been denied. She appeared in a tan prison jumper, hair pulled back, expression stony. The judge rejected her initial motion and approved the DA's request for a forensic audit of all HOA financials and property boundary disputes from the last 5 years. It wasn't just about me anymore. Karen had kicked a hornet's nest, and the whole county was watching now. By the time the pretrial hearings began, my name had become a bit of a rallying cry in coastal North Carolina. People I'd never met were emailing me copies of their own HOA nightmare stories. Some sent drone footage, others old plats showing illegal expansions, and a few just sent words of solidarity. I even got a fruit basket from a 90-year-old woman with a note that read, "Kick their entitled behinds, dear." Karen's legal team tried everything. They pushed to dismiss the forgery charges on technicalities, tried to downplay the temporary requisition of my home as a misinterpreted administrative action, and even argued that my refusal to join the HOA constituted willful isolation, incompatible with community norms. That one made Susan laugh out loud in open court. But the judge wasn't laughing. Every piece of evidence we presented hit like a freight train. The drone footage showing HOA reps lounging on my private beach. The county-verified maps proving I wasn't under HOA jurisdiction. The fake eviction notices bearing invalid stamps. The forensic signature analysis revealing that McKinley had used a printer model discontinued in 2017. And, of course, the now infamous body cam footage of Karen lunging at an officer and shrieking about seizing the house before the courts catch up. When we played that clip, you could feel the courtroom tighten. It wasn't just about my beach anymore. This had become a case study in small-scale tyranny, an HOA that had rotted from the head down. On the second day of hearings, 2 former HOA board members came forward with sworn statements. Both testified, under penalty of perjury, that Karen had orchestrated at least 4 other attempts to annex adjacent properties by manufacturing fake access claims, backdating permits, and even instructing the HOA lawyer to draft policy later to cover the actions. They admitted they went along with it out of fear. Karen had allegedly threatened to report one of them for tax fraud and the other for moral misconduct, whatever that meant in suburban terms. Susan cross-examined them like a lion in a law library. She backed them into timelines, forced them to admit knowledge of the forged documents, and even got one to confess they'd entered my yard at Karen's instruction with bolt cutters, not a court order. On day 3, the DA filed additional charges: conspiracy, fraud, destruction of private property, and unlawful use of official insignia. Bail was officially revoked for Karen, and a motion was submitted to begin dissolution proceedings for the HOA itself under State Code R 47F 3121, which allows termination of a homeowners association by judicial action if governance is proven to be fraudulent or abusive. That night, a local channel aired a special titled "The Beach That Broke the Board: How One Man Toppled an Empire of Sand." It was melodramatic as hell, but the interviews were gold. Especially the part where a former HOA secretary confessed, "Honestly, I thought it was just a beach. I didn't think it would send Karen to jail." By the end of the week, the verdict was in. Karen Lawrence was found guilty on 4 counts, including falsification of public records and assaulting an officer, and sentenced to 12 months in county custody, with 6 mandatory. She was also banned from holding any board or governance position in the state for 5 years. Her lawyer promised to appeal. The judge didn't care. Then came the damages hearing. The judge didn't blink before awarding me $78,000 in restitution for the gate, the fence, the pier, legal fees, and the exceptional mental burden of unlawful occupation. That last one, that was Susan's doing. She'd framed it as the psychological equivalent of your neighbor crawling into your bed and calling it community outreach. 2 HOA board members were indicted pending further investigation. The rest resigned before the ink dried on the dissolution paperwork. Seacrest Bay HOA was officially dead. On the walk out of the courthouse, I passed the sign that used to say, "Homeowners Welcome, Seacrest Bay Villas." Someone had spray-painted ex-owners over it. I didn't do it, but I didn't wipe it off either. After everything, the court battles, the forged documents, the trespassing, the eviction attempt, silence felt surreal. For the first time in months, my gate stayed closed, my pier untouched, and my morning coffee wasn't interrupted by clipboard-carrying lunatics. It took me days to let my guard down. I still checked the cameras twice a day, half expecting someone to be lounging on a towel waving a fake ordinance. But no one came. A month after the final hearing, I got the check. $78,000, mostly sucked up by repairs, security upgrades, and legal fees. But still, seeing those zeros typed under Defendant Seacrest Bay HOA dissolved felt like winning a war. I had the fence rebuilt, stronger this time, and hired a local metal shop to make a custom gate sign. It reads, "Private beachfront, not HOA. Trespassers will be sued," and just under that, in smaller print, "No towels, no Karens, no exceptions." I started getting emails from strangers, people fighting their own HOA nightmares across the country. Some had been fined for garden gnomes, others faced foreclosure over fence paint. I realized what I went through wasn't rare, just rarely fought back, so I built a simple website, beachfrontrights.com. I uploaded everything, deed scans, court documents, even drone footage, and a step-by-step on how to verify if your land is actually under HOA rule. It took off faster than I expected. A week later, a reporter called. Then a lawyer from Texas asked if he could cite my case. Then came a woman from Florida who mailed me a bottle of wine and a hand-drawn comic of Karen being dragged off a beach chair by the Coast Guard. I framed it. It hangs by the front door. As for Karen, last I heard, she filed for early release and got denied. One of her old board members moved out of state. Another now works at a bait shop 3 towns over. Seacrest Bay Villas elected a new interim council, mostly renters and quiet types. No one's bothered me since. Most mornings I carry my kayak down to the water, alone. The sea's been especially calm this fall. Lazy waves, pink skies, the occasional dolphin pod passing like clockwork. I sit out there sometimes and think about how close I came to losing this place. Not to a hurricane, but to paperwork, arrogance, and a woman with a laminated badge and too much free time. But in the end, the sand's still mine. The water's still mine, and the house still smells like cedar and salt. Some fights are worth it.